to talk about how is great recording in progress. Fantastic. So I want to really speak today. Well, first of all, welcome to the section. And this is again an invitation for input, for understanding your needs, for really looking ourselves in the mirror to see how we can continue developing this to really attend to the most important solutions in the problems that we need to attend to. And I think one thing that I have really emphasizing with the entire portfolio team, including the multifunctional landscapes, is whatever we do to solve a problem. What's the problem that we're trying to solve? For me, it's very clear that we do have a problem in this area, a problem that requires us to really look at multifunctional landscapes instead of just looking pieces of it. And I think you heard, if you were attending my plenary section, you probably heard that as well. And last week we were with the global science team, and one of the things we were discussing with a few of them was about the biomes. These different biomes and how different solutions are required when you look at the food systems, how you need to take that in consideration. So I hope in all the aspects, the water aspects, biodiversity aspects of the biomes, the communities, the cultural aspects and how they live there and how we actually help them with the right and smart interventions to really do this with impact. So that's the provocation, I think, is a big problem to be solved. But I'll tell you, we cannot solve this alone. It will take a village, as we say, it will take a village to be able to solve this problem. That's what I think this is so important for us to look at and to have you here, coming here, helping us and being such important partners. Thank you, and thank you all who accepted to participate and come and have this dialogue with us. We really we have a lot of gratitude for that, and this is just a beginning of dialogue. There's a lot more. We need to continue this dialogue to understand how we will tackle this very important problem. It's not so easy to solve, but we require all the brain power in this room and much more. Thank you.
There is a clear message. We have a task ahead, and I think you referred to a couple of millions of hectares that we have to improve. And that's very critical. And the message is also clear that as CGIAR, we can't do it alone. We need the partners, and I'm glad that we have a couple of them in the room. And in our panel discussion, we will see that we have almost more partners to do this work together. So Sandra, we have a small video about the multifunctional landscape. It's 4 minutes. Either you can watch it with us, but if you have to go, we are very happy that you've made it. Thanks. Is technology working for us, or is not complaining?
That over 75% of the Earth's land surface, polluted 2/3 of our oceans, and damaged 85% of wetlands. 1 million species within decades, impacting biodiversity, food security, and climate resilience. How can we restore our ecosystems while meeting the needs of a growing population? The issues require actions from the whole of society to address the global challenges, building on local solutions. The 3 Rio Conventions, the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, represent excellent entry points. They are translated at local levels as the National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, the National Land Degradation Neutrality Targets, and the National Determined Contributions and related National Action Plans. CGIAR and close partners contribute scientific evidence to informing these global and national policy discourses. Through a systems approach, CGIAR's science program on multifunctional landscapes is pioneering context-specific solutions to global challenges, balancing agricultural productivity, environmental sustainability, economic growth and socio-inclusion. These involve, among others, co-creating innovative agroecological solutions, nature-positive solutions, ecosystem-based approaches, land use planning and governance, sustainable markets, inclusive policies, gender equity and social fairness, real-time performance assessment, capacity sharing, innovation scaling, and cross-regional learning. The CGIAR's science program on multifunctional landscapes has the potential to contribute to transforming landscapes into thriving ecosystems and enhance socio-ecological resilience, that is, improving food and nutrition security, livelihoods of smallholder farmers, promoting socio-inclusion with women, youth and marginalized groups, while optimizing biodiversity and ecosystem gains to enhance climate adaptation and mitigation. Together, we can build a future where nature and people thrive. Restoring land ecosystems and reducing environmental degradation could generate annual economic returns of $125 to $140 trillion, 50% more than the global GDP in 2021. Join us in transforming landscapes for generations to come. Be part of the change.
As an appetizer, what we are going to listen to the next discussion, it's clear that we have to balance productivity, environmental sustainability with economic growth and social inclusion. And that takes, really, it was said even in the plenary, there is a need of co-creation, there is a need of co-development, there is a need of co-implementation. And that's why we have said the following panel. You will hear a panel from a panel where we hear from the multifunctional landscape, sustainable farming, but trying to link it to the agroecology TPP, but also hear from the UN decade on ecosystem restoration and try to see what is happening at FAO in terms of engagement and what kind of the barriers we face if we listen to people who have been working those areas for centuries. And that is the case of the Royal Botanic Gardens Q. That will be about the panel discussion. After that, we are going to engage all of you to really understand what you think, and that will be through a Slido. My colleague Gina will moderate that one, and we will have a short video of 1 minute when we will hear what are the feedbacks and comments from other stakeholders, taking into consideration the UN Environmental Assembly comments that they received back in 2024. Then we will open the floor for overall discussion. And then I will come back to the panel to really get the key statements in terms of what we need to do together to be able to support CGIAR to deliver the 2025-2030 portfolio. And then we invite all of you to join our group photo at the end of the session. Having said that, let me invite the panel members and to join. They are already here. So we will start with Ion. He comes to us from the World Fish. Then Oscar, who comes to us from CGIAR, but who is one of the co-directors of the Sustainable Farming Science Program. Then yes, Sandra, thank you very much. You are excused, please. Thank you very much. And land applause as Sandra leaves. Good. So as we continue, we will hear from Cynthia. She comes us from C4 Aircraft, but she's also there for the agroecology TPP. Then we'll hear from Natalia. She comes to us from UNDK for ecosystem restoration. Then we'll hear from Husna, who comes to us from FAO, the office in Kenya, and Phil, who comes to us from the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew in London. So I'm not introducing them that much because whenever I give them the floor, they will have something like 30 seconds to tell us who they are, something like 30 seconds to tell us about the organization, and then they will take something like 4 to 5 minutes to answer my question. And the first one goes to Yon. Yon, as I said, you will have a chance to introduce yourself, but we have heard from Sandra, really in terms of the priorities. We have heard from the video, many things that are happening. And you are quite very influential in the multifunctional landscape as one of the co-directors of the multifunctional landscape science program. We would like to hear from you how you see what was said in the video being operationalized in the field, where and with whom. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kagele. Yes, my name is Jörn Schmidt, and I'm the Director for Sustainable Aquatic Food Systems at World Fish, and I'm also the Deputy Interim Director for the Multifunctional Landscapes. I don't want to spend too much time to talk about myself, but just as a warning, I have worked on system science, and so this is why I think, I don't have slides.
Oh, you don't have slides.
No, sorry, I don't have slides. So you have to listen to me. But I think it's sometimes easier to listen rather than being distracted by these nice pictures that we have just seen in the video. So I've been working in system science, and my background is fisheries and marine social ecological systems. So which brings, I think, a very interesting aspect to the work of the CGIAR, which is traditionally much more focused on land systems. But World Fish, as the name says, is dealing with fisheries and aquaculture and marine and systems. So we are looking into combining or integrating that with the work of all the other CG centers. So I think I couldn't have said it better than the video already captured the essence of the multifunctional landscape program, really focusing on a systems approach to address food, to address livelihoods, to address biodiversity and ecosystem conservation. And I think that is a mouthful, and we have been talking about 3 Rio Conventions, and you can add other legal frameworks that we have, or agreements that we internationally have, like the Convention Global Biodiversity Framework and others, which is always quite a challenge when you need to break that down from that very global level to something that actually is being done concretely on the ground. And I think this is what Kagele was asking, how do we make it happen? How do we implement the work that we are here, that is ahead of us? And we're facing a lot of these challenges. And obviously, looking into the different aspects, the social, the economic, institutional, and environmental aspects, people have a tendency to get a little bit scared when they need to think of it as a system. And that is always where I need to say that, don't worry, you need to embrace the complexity of a system to understand how we can simplify it. And I think this is where we start breaking it down. So we provide a framework where we're taking the systems approach to understand what are the concrete issues in a particular landscape, and the landscape being defined by either the biophysical characteristics or social conditions or an institutional setup. But most important is that what we want to take is the whole of what is being done in the landscape to understand where is food being produced, where is it being processed, how is it distributed? Is enough available from within the landscape, or do we need to import food from outside the landscape? What is the effect of that production, processing, and distribution on the environment? How is the interaction working? And to face a lot of different trade-offs. So how can we make that concretely happen? And the only way that we can make it concretely happen is that we are working with the community on the ground to understand the concrete issues, and we are able to understand how different issues that are realities in the landscape are interacting, to identify then the interventions that are necessary to address these issues, and actually taking the best of all of the wide expertise that we have in the CG and the different programs, not only the sustainable farming, but also particularly sustainable farming, they are working on the ground with the people. How can we do that? And I think this is when the work is really complementary, and the multifunctional landscape serves as a focal area where we're doing all of these programs. And I think this is what I want to say. I don't have any timer, so I don't know when I'm running out of 5 minutes, Kagila, but I think I might. Okay. Thank you very much, Kagila. So I think this is important, that multifunctional landscape is not operating in isolation, but is actually working very closely with the other programs. And we will hear from Oscar in a minute how that actually works, for example, concretely with the program on sustainable farming. What does it mean? Where sustainable farming brings in solutions and ways of operating that need to be put in the context of a landscape, and where we need to understand how it operates in a particular location, so that we are actually able to address the issues of these trade-offs. So I think this is nicely transitioning to Oscar, and give Kangela the word to introduce Oscar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The message is clear. We have to address complex issues, but in a simplified manner. We have to deal with a lot of trade-offs in those areas. And we were talking about really the engagement of actors at landscape level. Now, Oscar, the complexity of landscape, we understand that, but there is always a need to do a bit of deep dives, go at the farm level, even at the field level, because one size fits all probably will not work for us. And we would like to hear from you how the Sustainable Farming Science Program will connect those aspects and link it to landscapes. And more importantly, we try to see how the farming variability will influence the decisions we make and really how we engage. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Oscar Ortiz. I am the interim director of the Sustainable Farming Science Program. I have worked most of my career at the International Potato Center, and mostly I would say on mountain agriculture. So as Joel mentioned, the CGIAR research portfolio aims at transforming food, land, and water systems that by definition requires complex systems thinking. So that the different levels that the portfolio is addressing, namely crops, fields, farms, communities, landscapes, policy environments, innovation systems, can connect much better in order to support decision-making at farm level, where most of the decisions occur. But farmers make decisions or make better decisions when there is an enabling environment where other programs can contribute, like better policies or better advisory services regarding climate trends, etc. So the challenge that we have, in my opinion, is how do we accelerate the delivery of solutions to farmers? I mean, in the breeding area work, they have learned very quickly, and they have now accelerated breeding schemes. So rather than 15 years to develop a variety, they can develop in 7 or so. The same challenge we should have when dealing with crop management or landscape management. We cannot wait 15 years to get solutions. We need to accelerate them as much as we can. In most locations, smallholder farmers actually work in vulnerable conditions. They are connected to soil degradation, water shortages, forest depletion, biodiversity loss. So whatever decisions they make, they have environmental externalities. So we need to really support them so that they can manage their farms and generate economic, environmental, and social benefits. And as you know, farmers in many parts of the world still manage land races. In the Andes, for example, farmers still manage more than 3,000 different types of potatoes, and that's part of the system, and that needs to be maintained as part of the system in a way that it's part of the livelihood. The same occurs with maize in Mexico, Central America, South America, or rice varieties in South and Southeast Asia or in Africa. Another critical point is that soil is an element that connects agriculture and environment. So promoting soil management, that's an element where sustainable farming and multifunctional landscapes can work together. It's essential for example, achieving the Rio Convention goals in terms of promoting sustainable soil productivity and ecosystem health. But we need for this to happen multi-sector partnerships and demand-oriented research and development. So not only technologies, but innovations that are supported by enabling policies are critical. Let me know when we are in the 5 minutes. Okay. So just a few examples of sustainable farming types of solutions or technologies or innovations. In Vietnam, the team has developed a precision direct seeded rice. It's a machinery that reduces seed amount, fertilizers of nitrogen, pesticide use, and reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And they are also looking at managing crop residues in an ecological way. That's an important innovation that in terms of rice, given the area that exists in rice and the contribution of rice for greenhouse gas emissions is critical to be scaled. Another element is monitoring crop pests and diseases and alert stakeholders for preparedness and control. These transboundary pests and diseases are spreading. An example of this is connected with the potato purple top disease, which started somehow in Ecuador, is moving to Colombia, to Peru, and is threatening that big biodiversity that exists in those locations. Farmers are moving up to the highlands, upper and upper, trying to escape from that insect that transmit the virus or the bacteria, and then they are affecting the environment in the upper Andes. So, as you can see, there are different elements connected to protect the environment. Could be crop management, could be pest management, predictions of what's going to happen so that stakeholders, not only farmers, governments, national systems can be prepared for what could come in the future. So that would be my contribution at this point.
Excellent, even for timekeeping. Thanks. Yes, these are really good inspirational ideas. For me, you almost made the same point. There is a critical need of system thinking, and that is not only technical innovations, it's social innovations, policies, market, financing, and so on. And with the good examples, issues related to soil health, pest management, and so on. Let me now move on to Sandia, who comes to us from the agroecology TPP. And the point really, Sandia, you have listened to the colleagues, and I would like to find out from you whether the message resonates with the thinking and the vision of the agroecology TPP, and what kind of tips you may have for us as we implement the CGIAR ambition on environmental health and biodiversity. The floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Sandhya. I'm a social systems scientist just next door at C4ICRAF. But C4ICRAF is also home to the Secretariat for what is called the Transformative Partnership Platform on Agroecology, Agroecology TPP. Now, before addressing the question of what resonates most, it might help to explain a little bit about this platform. And basically, the TPP came into sort of being in the aftermath of the 2019 HLP report on agroecological and innovative approaches. And basically, through various conversations at global and regional levels across, which included CG centers, there was a call for the need for an initiative that would actually actively look to address the knowledge and implementation gaps when it comes to agroecological transitions. And thus, this platform was born. And in the last few years, we have brought on board over 80 partners across various disciplines, but also across different walks, whether they're research, policy, private sector, farmer, organizations and civil society organizations. So we will be working actively in the area of work 7, which focuses a lot on engagement in the multifunctional landscape science program. And this is important to have such platforms in play because we do reach out to a lot of different kinds of stakeholders. And that is at the heart of agroecology, that for the kind of systems level solutions we seek to achieve or work towards, you do need a truly sort of inclusive participatory process where all stakeholders of agri-food systems are present. So beyond that, 2 things that resonate from the video and of course the program is that we know that over the past decade, the Rio Conventions increasingly acknowledge the strong synergies between agroecological principles and agroecology elements and the objectives of these conventions to tackle climate change, biodiversity loss, and desertification. And I think as was mentioned by the first presenter, systems level approaches are key. And this is really at the heart of what agroecology tries to advocate for through both a transdisciplinary approach, but also through active co-creation. But the second part is beyond the science and looking at solutions that will, in fact, provide integrated solutions. It's important to make sure who is in the room, what are the processes by which these programs are designed, the solutions and strategies are arrived at. And that is also something that resonates deeply with the work of the Agroecology TPP, to make sure that what we're doing here is, in fact, demand-driven, to make sure that it is sustainable in the long term. In terms of what are some tips for the portfolio, so again, we're seeing that, you know, to be able to deliver on its sort of priorities on environmental health and biodiversity priorities, the first is, of course, that we see that there is a growing body of evidence and widespread support for agroecology and other nature-based approaches. We're seeing this, I think, as was presented in an earlier plenary, there's a lot of movement in the policy space where many of these sort of convention targets and goals are being enmeshed with action plans for food systems transformation in countries like Vietnam. Just in Kenya last year, we had the launch of the National Agroecology Strategy. So you see that this is something that's coming from the ground up, a call for these kinds of policy arrangements and commitments to really transform agri-food systems. So really, I think, as was just mentioned, scaling would be probably the research priority that we really try to look at. And the CGIAR has already done a great deal of work in the earlier initiative on agroecology, where lots of practices, strategies, tools were developed. Now, using the work that has already been done, but also leveraging other platforms like the Agroecology TPP. I think the real priority would be, how do we scale these? We seem to be knowing what works in different contexts, but how do we actually scale this to be able to keep up the momentum and really sort of reach the kind of transformation at larger levels of the landscape? And finally, maybe just because I don't know how many members on the panel are farmers, last week, the Agroecology TPP hosted its annual members forum in Hanoi. And actually the crux of this year's members forum was to really center the entire week's worth of activities on what are sort of farmer priorities in research. What do farmers want to see in terms of strategies, and how do they want to be engaged? So I'm sort of stealing from one of the statements that was presented actually by representatives from the Asian Farmers Association, the Pan-African Farmer Organization, and also the Latin Farmers Organization, where 3 kind of broad priorities or calls were stated. They are that, one, that researchers should really engage farmers equally in all research stages, right from the design of these programs, interventions, and activities, all the way to evaluation, dissemination. How do we get to also sort of work with the evidence that is generated? The second is, do share these research findings broadly to be able to boost the kind of consumer demand and market demand that is essential for these farmers to keep up the agroecological practices and other nature-based approaches to make their farming viable. And finally, to involve farmer organizations and cooperatives in the research program governance. And I'll close by just saying that I think yesterday there was a plenary speaker who was a farmer representative who kind of was tossing around the term co-creation. It gets thrown around a lot. What does that actually mean? What do those processes look like? What do those engagements look like? That is also an active part of what the agroecology TPP across its projects and partners are also working on. And we would love to contribute that aspect as well in the science program. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. I think really the most critical message here is the action, vision to action, to make sure that the stakeholders are actively engaged, to make sure that we don't use buzzword, but we really make sure that we know how to get that implemented. And I think it's a really good continuity to hear from Natalia. Really based on the experience with the UN decades on ecosystem restoration, we know that you work with a lot of partners, stakeholders, and more importantly, member states. If you have to scale innovations, as Cynthia was saying, probably we need the member states and the different stakeholders to be able to address the issues that we have been talking about. What kind of tips and secret from your experience you can be able to share with the CGIAR portfolio?
Thank you very much. There are no any secrets, and I'm more than happy to speak here. If you could just put the slides up. Yeah, thank you. No, it's fine. So I'm not a farmer, but actually I'm having a kind of small scale restoration plot on the former collective farm areas, and I'm really trying to do my best in terms of getting kind of indigenous plants and some other parts of the ecosystems which were pulled away now to come back. So yeah, I'm coordinating the UN Decade on ecosystem restoration, and I'm based here in Nairobi. FAO and the UNEP, but we have now more than 300 partners behind us really to move on the restoration. And SGR is one of them. I'm more than happy to welcome again. And as it was pointed out, the UN Decade actually was proclaimed in 2021 as a kind of UNGA resolution. So it's member states, but of course it's beyond member states. And that's why we're really trying to get all the community around the looking at the relationship between human and nature being restored, and of course looking in terms of ecosystem loss, fragmentation, degradation have been ended, and we've got just 10 years to run, and even less now because we're in the midway of the UN Decade. As we're responding to the Rio, it's clear that restoration is cutting across all three of these, but also, of course, sustainable development goals, especially here, as it was mentioned, while we are looking at food security at all the agricultural activities, you cannot do really much without healthy ecosystems around, right? But also we're looking at bond challenge and some other elements around. So if I can come with the next one. I don't think it works. Next slide, please. Yes, so very quickly in terms of what we're doing, so then you understand the messages at the end, what I see in terms of the lessons learned. We're really trying to have practical restoration examples, so-called flagships, and then you'll see one of the videos later on, where we're building on the principles of the UN Decade, and then we're really trying to come with a very practical blueprints and examples how you can do restoration in terms of cross-cutting through all Rio Conventions, but also the elements beyond this. Next slide, please. Yes, and then we have the action plan, which is really trying to move in terms of different topics, cutting across also climate, communities, education, etc., etc. Next one, please. The principles are actually also, I mean, I would not stop too much on these, but I just wanted to mention that they're looking in terms of the knowledge integration, global contribution, different types of activities. So we're really trying to bring this multidimensional action together, and therefore having a kind of joint action under the UN Decade. Next one, please. And then we've been coming recently with the standards of practice, which are coming to actually to the farmers and everyone who's interested to be the partner and learn from the EU indicators how to apply these principles and how to run with the practical restoration activities. Next slide, please. And yes, we do have also the monitoring system, which is looking at how you can integrate different data sets and how we also put together different elements, because it's a lot of interest in terms of developing geospatial elements, different, let's say, data processing tools, AI, etc., etc. And next one, please. And yes, I'm coming actually to the main slide. That's why I was very quickly rushing through all others. Our learning and what we would like to share is actually we need to have really different partners on board. Of course, yes, since here we're looking more from the scientific and maybe a bit of academic and research angle, but yes, we need farmers. We need also all types of unconverted, let's say, stakeholders, because sometimes we're preaching too much to already converted, right? So we need to bring also, like, for example, our business, we need to bring just normal citizens, sometimes also, well, decision makers from different sectors, because they don't see the world with our own lenses, right? So we need really to explain why they do certain things. We need also more practical restoration examples, since I'm also looking through these restoration lenses. Yes, we don't have these flagships, but definitely it's not the limit. I mean, it's just some of the examples, but we're really trying to support these practical examples and practical restoration, which is hopefully paving the way of having these clear blueprints and also something like inspiring for the change on the ground, right? So it's not just about the principles, it's not just about Rio Conventions, which are very high, it's not just about us speaking here in Nairobi, right? But it's doing something on the ground. The next one, of course, is data and proof, because we've been always asked, so what? What are the benefits? How much does it cost? What exactly you would get? In how many years you would reach these hectares, et cetera, right? So that's why, yes, so we're working on so-called FERM platform, which is Framework for Ecosystem Restoration Monitoring, but it's just, again, one of the examples. So definitely would be happy to connect the dots and see how we have this data monitoring evaluation in order to have the proof and in order to be able to stick with very clear numbers in hands, right? It's not just our assumptions, not just our goodwill, but something really robust. And then the next one, which is also something which we're expanding, and I think I've heard also before a lot of references to capacity, knowledge, and learning, and that's why we have an action plan, which is looking exactly from this point of view. We work, for example, with indigenous people in terms of indigenous knowledge, right? We're really trying to build also local capacities, because again, being sometimes in the capitals, we're not able really to go down to the ground by ourselves. So we need really to have local communities and people who are capable and who are trained enough really to do the action on the ground. And then, of course, also mutual learning, because it's so inspiring to see all these great examples. And then we don't have to repeat ourselves, but that's something which is really kind of moving us much quicker, right? Once we have this, as you were mentioning, like new technological type of approaches or new, well, whatever innovative practices, so that's something that we have to take around and then share. We have the digital hub, which was, well, I think it was inaugurated very recently. So once you feel like sharing your ecosystem restoration examples, please go there, then you would see a lot of nice stories. And then, of course, again, as you indicate, we're really trying to run quite a lot of different events. We have lots of reports and materials. And of course, you can also join Generation Restoration. So I hope I'm still in time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I think there is a very clear messages here. Yes, we want to do restoration, and there is a cost behind it. How do we demonstrate the benefit to all the key stakeholders involved? And there is a critical monitoring and evaluation framework in place for these things to work. Then you will be coming after Husma, so you still have a chance. Yeah, with this, let us be real on what Natalia just told us. And we have issues, land degradation, soil degradation, water pollution, and so on, and we try to address those. But what is really very difficult for us sometimes to understand or to grasp is what are the root causes of this which is happening. And we would like to hear from Husna, really based on her experience within FAO, but even other spheres. We will try to see what can we do to have a good understanding or the root causes that are creating the issues we are seeing for environment, for biodiversity, and so on, and how can we be able to address those? Thanks.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Husna Mbarak. I work for FAO, Kenya Country Office, and I work around land, natural resource, and environment governance. To address the root causes of biodiversity loss, climate change, and land degradation, one thing we need to put into consideration, or probably even move beyond, is beyond the technical solution and focus on context-specific socioeconomic and political factors driving these challenges. And doing this is actually is encouraged to using participatory approaches and local knowledge. And I think most of the speakers have spoken about indigenous knowledge, and that actually put in a lot of emphasis in how to really mitigate some of these challenges. I would like to give out some of the approaches we've been able to consider. I categorize them in four, and one is understand the interconnection of each of the issues, especially the land as a nexus, recognizing that land is a crucial nexus for all the three challenges, where unsustainable land management practices exacerbate biodiversity loss, contribute to climate change through greenhouse gas emission, and lead to land degradation. The other interconnection is the social economic drivers. Investigate how poverty, inequality, lack of access to resources, and unsustainable consumption patterns contribute to such challenges and problems. And the last one in this category will be the political and institutional factors, which actually brings in a lot of how we move forward in terms of governance structures, in terms of policies, but also how we can be able to enable approaches which really enable or hinder sustainable land management and biodiversity conservation. This is one of the most, one of the most important factor because of how governance structures are within the region, within the globe, and recognizing the sovereignty of the various states. The second approach is focus on context-specific root cause, which has really enabled quite move in terms of the various intervention and facilitated most, especially when you recognize. One of them is already been mentioned here is the local knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, where we have to really put the people in front, the indigenous people in front, the traditional knowledge. So as we look at the various perspectives and experiences, they have been there, they have been conserving, they have been using, they have been managing. So how can we really bring that to the relations of what especially in the aspects of land management and the resource use. The other is to enhance participatory approaches, meaning everybody has to be on the table from the onset of any intervention, including planning, implementation and monitoring intervention, because it's for them actually, and how we can really be able to encourage sustainability and ownership of these processes. And geographical variation, one solution should not fit all, and I think it's important we should be able to see the requirement of tailored solutions in every intervention, and also recognizing the other peculiar specific sectors within any interventions we are doing. And that's what FAO has been doing for and ensuring that all aspects are put in. Natalia has talked of data and monitoring in aspects of the decade work, but this should be a cross-cutting issues in terms of collection of comprehensive data for land use, land cover, and biodiversity, anything, climate change, and be able to also to ensure that most of the interventions align to that credible and comprehensive data, and be able to put up good systems for monitoring and evaluation, which actually they are people-centered, and everybody is included in the discussion. And importantly, the early warning systems. So as you are able to engage before something actually gets into business. And the fourth approach is on policy and governance, aspects of policy coherence, enforcement of the various policies and laws at various levels, but also investing in sustainable solutions, which works well per the aspects of the intervention, including agroecology, sustainable forestry, and the likes, and most importantly, address the inequalities at all levels in terms of participation, but also in terms of the actual access and use and management of the other resources. I think I will stop there after sharing that.
Thank you very much. Great messages, I think, really in terms of understanding the root causes. Yeah, that's great in terms of the time management. In terms of understanding the root causes with aspects related to socioeconomic and as aspects related to institutions and policy and politics, someone in the panel discussion made it clear that we need the political will, the political commitments and actions for things to happen. And that takes a bit of participatory approaches, but taking also indigenous knowledge, and more importantly, think about policy coherence and governance. That takes us to the next one in terms of really listening to the experience of others. Feel the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew has almost a century of experience in terms of biodiversity conservation and sustainable use, not only in the UK, but across the world, especially in low and middle-income countries. You have probably learned a lot in 100 years of experience. What can you share in terms of the barriers? We have heard everything that people are doing, the good and the bad, and what is really challenging. What kind of real experience you can share in terms of the barriers, the obstacles to make things happen, and if you have any suggestion of options to overcome those, that would be great. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Kagile, and thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you particularly for the invitation to come and speak. I'm very privileged to be able to share my experience here. So my name is Phil Stevenson, and I work at the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, which many of you will know is a beautiful sunny 300 acres in southwest London, but that actually hides about 600 plant and fungal scientists who are studying to address some of the global challenges, primarily focused on climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and also conserving and preventing biodiversity loss. So today, I'd like to answer your question in a very specific way, Kagile, if I can. It's almost as if I knew what the question was going to be before I turned up. Can I have the next slide, please? So today I'm going to introduce you to a recent paper from our team, and this was work that was led by Sophie, Jago and James, who are both in my team, adapting wild biodiversity conservation approaches to conserve agrobiodiversity. We use the word agrobiodiversity to mean the variety of domesticated animals, plants and microorganisms that are used in food and agriculture. It's a little bit more restricted than the FAO definition, which includes associated agrobiodiversity. But the model that we propose, or the framework that we're proposing here, should benefit associated agrobiodiversity as well. So it's very much about the biodiversity of the plants that we use, the animals that we use, and the microorganisms that we use to produce our food. Can you go on to the next slide, please, Andrew? So apologies about the font size here, but I hope you can read some of this. I'll talk you through it anyway. So we've considered the challenges facing the conservation of agrobiodiversity as it compares to wild biodiversity. And we propose this framework as a way to address this. Broadly speaking, agrobiodiversity is currently very poorly served. And if we consider how we have a unified approach to addressing wild biodiversity conservation, we might be able to find a way to address this challenge for agro biodiversity. So in this table on the left-hand side, you can see a column with 4 stages, or the processes of conservation as applied to wild biodiversity: data generation, determining priorities, active conservation or actions, and then trying to ensure the sustainability of those actions. And if we consider what's being used and developed for wild biodiversity conservation, we do have unified approaches. So, for example, in terms of generation of data, we've got GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information System. We've got red lists at IUCN, which are a unified approach to understanding which species are at risk. In terms of determining priorities, we've got biodiversity hotspots. We've got key biodiversity areas, important bird or plant areas. We've got processes that are universally used to address these challenges. We've got ex situ conservation, we've got in situ conservation with protected areas. And we've got programs for ecosystem services and nature-based solutions and better governance. If you consider the same areas for agrobiodiversity, it's very much more poorly served. We do need much more standardized global databases for agrobiodiversity records. We need red list approaches where we can have them. There are some indices, but these are not necessarily universally used or adopted. We could adopt important plant area approaches, agrobiodiversity-focused other effective area-based conservation measures, or OECMs, rather a mouthful, that one. And we have very little in the way of incentives for farmers or anyone else to conserve agrobiodiversity, and that's probably where we have the biggest challenge. Next slide, please. If you see how this maps onto some of the international policy commitments, you can see how addressing these for agrobiodiversity could lead to addressing many of the opportunities that we have through, for instance, PGRFA or the Global Biodiversity Framework and the Sustainable Development Goals, which really underpin Rio Conventions and all of the other approaches that we're trying to adopt. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to finish with the example that I'd like to propose. If you can go on to the last slide, please, Wanderer. So this is our strategic land use planning for agrobiodiversity conservation proposal. And here, so I was asked for an example or two of how we could implement change. And in the paper, again, we propose adopting an approach used in wild biodiversity conservation using a zoning approach as illustrated in panel A. We've got the core zone, which is our wild biodiversity protected area. Then we've got a buffer zone where activities must be compatible with conserving the wildlife in that core zone. And then we've got the transition zone where we can have suitable use zone. If we adopt that approach in panel B to a proposed multi-objective zoning, which really fits in with the multifunctional landscape approach, you can see we have the wild biodiversity conservation zone, could be designated to any conservation. And then on the edge of that, we have agrobiodiversity conservation zones, zones that are specifically there to conserve agrobiodiversity. And this also ameliorates one challenge farmers have who are farming next door to protected areas. They are generally poorer than farmers that are farming elsewhere because they have less options in how they can produce their food. And then finally, that is then adjacent to more productive zones. And it happens that the high agrobiodiversity landscapes are much more likely to be in countries that are disproportionately found in tropical areas and also food security challenged. And so what we're proposing through this model, and you can read the paper to find out much more about it and approach the two main authors, is proposing that agrobiodiversity-focused OECMs, that's other effective area-based conservation measures, could help reach targets such as the GBF 30 by 30 targets with substantial co-benefits for food security, socioeconomic development, and wider conservation, so addressing SDGs as well. Thank you, Cargile.
Thanks. And I think there is some critical message to take, really, land use planning for biodiversity conservation and sustainable use, and the critical role that the wildlife biodiversity conservation will play a critical role for agrobiodiversity conservation. Thank you very much for that. Now it's time for us to start engaging the audience. I will invite my colleague Gina to engage you through a slide. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Kageli. Really interesting conversations here. Now, based on what we've heard from our various speakers, we'd like to, introduce a Slido session. Just feel free to respond as well as you can. Just keep it short. So, first of all, you can just take out your phones and scan the QR code that is being displayed there. If you have any issues scanning the QR code, please just let me know and we'll help you sort it out. So we have 3 questions and approximately 2 minutes for each question. Okay, so question 1. You just heard about the ambition of CGIAR and selected partners on environmental health and biodiversity. Do you foresee any opportunities to collaborate or partner with your organization? So I can see that a lot of responses have started coming in. Yes, 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 there's a very high potential. Yes, such initiatives must go hand in hand with prioritizing public health. Great. Great. So please keep your answers coming in because we are going to share these, we're going to share the responses with everyone at the end of the session. Very big opportunities. Great. Yes, gene banks. Absolutely. Yes, I think with UNEP to address the environmental dimension of One Health. Okay, thank you. And we are moving to question 2. What else do you think that CGIAR and close partners should integrate in their ambition on environmental health and biodiversity to effectively contribute to the integration of the 3 Rio Conventions? Youth inclusion. Find the nexus between the 3. Great collaboration with country government. Someone said anything. Develop monitoring indicators for targets. Human health. Youth inclusion again, inclusivity, form synergies. Clear synergies again. Great, consider urbanization. Youth inclusion again, inclusivity again. Great. Wildlife health. Okay, so you can keep your answers coming in and we will move on to question 3. Is there anything where you would like the speakers and panelists to elaborate further? One Health. Is there anything where you would like the speakers and panelists to elaborate further? Gene banks, One Health approach, corporate partnerships, policy development and implementation, gene banks, environmental health. Agroecology. Biodiversity in drylands. Agroecology, TPP. Youth engagement. Agroecology, environmental health, engagement and partnerships. Yes, so I've seen a couple of people ask if they can get the slides after the session. Definitely, yes. We will share the slides with you after the session. Okay, so just the Slido will still be open, so please keep sharing your answers with us, and we will share your responses. We'll analyze it and share the outcome of the responses with everyone after the session. Thank you for participating.
Thanks, Gina, and thanks to everyone for the contribution. We will come back to some of the points that you've already made, but you will get some of your feedback. But let us hear from some of the stakeholders who are at the UNEA 2024, what kind of feedback they had in terms of things that should be done differently and what the focus should be. It's a short video of 1 minute and something. Then we'll really open for Q&A for those who want to ask a question or make a comment verbally. Thanks. Technology is always what it is. So instead of us sitting and wait for them to find out what is the issue with the video, let us open the floor. If in the audience there is anyone who has a question that you want to make loudly, please feel free to do so. You can address it to any of the panelists here. Then we'll be able to engage and try to see what kind of answers we can get, and probably try to see also the opportunities for further collaboration. So it's not only asking questions, but also providing some comments to explore options where we can collaborate further. Yeah, the floor is yours. Yes, please. And here we need my glasses to be able to see far.
Hello. I'm Ronaldo, the CEO of Impact Africa LLC and Secretary for Greens International, or GSI for short. I've not had a chance to ask a question in any of these sessions, so this will be my first and probably my last. It's the only concern I have. What are the parameters, or the word I should use, modalities or parameters, that CGIAR requires to form a sort of a consortia or a partnership with any other private organization on any project, be it agroecology or anything to do with climate resilience? If there's an innovative program that an organization has, what are the parameters, or how does that partnership begin? It's the only concern I have. Thank you.
Good question. I will open the floor to take 1 or 2, 3 questions before I open the panelists to answer. If there is no more question, then I can ask them to answer. I don't see. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Marielle Kassenberg. I work for the Netherlands Food Partnership and facilitate a community of practice around biodiversity and food systems, trying to bridge actors in both communities to stronger collaborate together. What I notice often in narratives around biodiversity and multifunctional landscapes is a focus on trade-offs. And I'm trying to see a path forward where we can move to a more nuanced narrative around opportunities and synergies that can also provide the interest to these partners to understand how they can collaborate on these opportunities rather than the negative trade-offs. Thank you.
Yes, please. Yes, I think. Yes, please.
Thank you so much to all the speakers for a very interesting session. I have a question to all of you, I guess. Many of the interventions for restoring biodiversity, like REDD+, for example, have been very problematic, based on accounts of increasing tree coverage, not necessarily looking at species biodiversity, and also, I think, assessing gains, economic gains, and social impacts in a way that I think leaves a lot to be rethought. How do we make sure that we don't fall into the same trap of these limitations going forward? Thanks a lot.
We'll start with the first round of three, then we will open for another round. Yeah, I've seen the hands 1 or 2, so I will not forget about you. So I think we have 3 questions. One is about what are the conditions, criteria, procedure to engage with partners. I think either Oscar or Yuan, one of you can take it. Then we got also another question, which is about really, let us go beyond the trade-offs and think about the synergies and the opportunities for collaboration. That would be great. And how do we really avoid anything that we can call maladaptation in a way? How can restoration be responsive for biodiversity and so on? And I think we have a good panel here for people to start. Let us start with the first one with Oscar and whoever wants to go first.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. The answer may be relatively simple. We have to have overlapping objectives. The CGIAR has 5 impact areas that is part of the strategy, so overlapping objectives. The second, complementary comparative advantages, so that the 2 partners support and the added value is higher than the 2 working alone. And the third one is that partnership generates opportunities for additional funding that attracts non-conventional donors, including private sector in particular, on this type of issues. So I think it's relatively simple. There's a conversation that could evolve from those terms into a concrete project proposal, and then resource mobilization. Thank you.
In case you want to add something, or if you are happy, so I'm also happy. So we can move to the next one. Consider trade-offs, but how do we move on to start considering synergies and so on? And that is open to anyone, but I see Phil being ready.
Yeah, that's a really great question. But from the farmer's point of view, there's always a trade-off, so it's very hard to avoid, unfortunately. And certainly in the work that we've been doing, trying to incentivize farmers to participate in conservation is really, really challenging. The experience we have from Europe is that farmers will do anything for money. And the reality is we probably need to pay for it. How we do that, I really do not know. But we actually have a program of work in Ethiopia associated with a rather special crop there called NSET, where we are investigating how we can increase conservation of agrobiodiversity through financial incentives, because there are perceived trade-offs. But I do recognize that there needs to be a much more positive spin on perhaps some of these. The reality, though, I did mention it when I spoke, the work that we've done at Kew so far, where we're more focused probably on the protected areas rather than the farmed areas, is farmers who are farming adjacent to protected areas generally do less well than farmers who are farming elsewhere. And we really need to find ways to essentially fill that income gap for them. And this may be an opportunity to do that through OECMs, or thinking about their land as OECMs. Thank you.
Yes, we can move to the third one, which is really how restoration can contribute to biodiversity conservation and livelihoods. And I see Natalia being ready for that.
I think the question was also partly how we do the restoration right? Because the reference was also made to some monocrops and monocultures, and that's why at least within the UN decade, but it's also of course with partners, we've been moving on the principles, on the standards of practice, whatever we're really trying to outline what are the best available like practices, approaches, and kind of examples already of how you do things right. And for us now is probably a bit of time really to see how we engage, also referring to the question before, how we engage more outside with this, let's say, wider farmers community and maybe with more kind of stakeholders, because some of the principles, of course, come in with certain limitations, right? So in this case, the right approach is really trying to restore as well, but also coming with so-called productive ecosystems, right? So yes, in some cases, you can really restore to this natural status if you can, but in some cases, the ecosystems were so much degraded and you're not able really to come to this pristine whatever elements, even if you invest a hell of money, right? So that's why, yeah, I think it's also, we're looking forward a very interesting topic, how to come with this productive landscape restoration in a kind of package, as it was mentioned. Yes, if you're farming next to the natural areas, so some restored areas, you have higher productivities, yes, because you have pollinators, you have also some kind of other types of elements which are supporting your productive ecosystem, how to say, right? So maybe we have to really come with more clear examples and measurements, how you really prove that it makes sense. So more and more people are being involved. Thanks.
Thank you, Natalia. I see that it's an interesting topic, and we have many colleagues interested to contribute. Sandhya in 30 seconds, and who's now also 30 seconds.
Yeah, no, actually, Natalia just actually used the word. So when it comes to measurement, I'm actually answering the last two questions, one on the trade-offs and the one on social impacts. So some of the work within the agroecology TVB is actually looking at this issue of measurement, right? And if you want to achieve the kind of transformation, you'll also have to reassess what are the kind of trade-offs farmers are willing to make, what are the actual outcomes that matter, do you value better nutrition in your household over maybe some marginal loss in income. So we have, for example, again, the Agroecology Initiative developed a tool before it closed called HOPA, which is aligned with the agroecology principles, which again transcends both the sort of biophysical aspects, but also the social, economic, and sort of rights-based approaches. But also we've developed another framework for assessment under what's called the metrics project, which is to actually have a participatory process to design assessments that specifically address this issue of what are the trade-offs and synergies that a certain user or farmers are interested in. So I just wanted to mention that.
Excellent. Thanks for the addition. Husna, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to have a cross-cutting response to the second question and the third question. What is important, actually topping up to what my co-panelists talked of, what is important is, and I think this is a question even asked by farmers, by communities down there, what is it in for me or for us? And I think what is important in any of the engagements, any of the interactions, aspects of ownership is really, taken in by themselves for purposes of sustainability. And I think that is where probably the trade-off come in, but the opportunities and synergies for partnership coming at all levels. And also the last bit is the coordination bit, where definitely we have so many players on the table, including the communities themselves and the people on the ground. But what happens is when it's not really coordinated well, things, happen in terms of this is a project which came in this period, and or this an intervention which came in this period, and it left. So those are some of the very important aspects we need to look into. Thank you.
Thanks, Husna. Wandera, I think technology has worked for you. So if you can play the video, then after the video, we go question number 1, question number 2, and if I can take question number 3, if there is any. Yes, 3.
Beautiful world.
Decision makers are ignorant of the destructions going on.
My fear is that we will not be fast enough in mitigating.
My fear is that future generations will miss out on all the beauty, that pollution will take over our beautiful world.
My fear is that most of our decision makers are ignorant of the destructions going on.
My fear is that we will not be fast enough in mitigating climate change.
We can continue playing with it.
My fear is that my children and grandchildren will have no fresh air, water, or land, that their quality of life will be so lacking.
My fear is that greed, capitalism, and short-term profits will win over our planet's health, and that human beings, with their actions, will deliberately destroy biodiversity.
My fear is that we will be too late. But my hope is that we can be brave, stop talking and start acting, to come together as a family and heal the planet.
Comments, one of the things we just said, but really some of the critical barriers as Phil was telling us, but let us take the 3 questions before I come back to the panelists. Yes.
Hello, my name is Chieta Hiri. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I really wanted to be in the session because, and I like the logo of with science we can. I'm looking at it and we're seeing that it's almost like as we drive for more climate and biodiversity action, as we make more aggressive targets, we're having certain parts of the world being left behind. So when you look at the monitoring and reporting frameworks or the country selection for certain donors and funders, we've seen it with climate climate action. 79% of climate financial flows on the continent are going to 4 countries. You look at Malawi, Kenya, Zambia, Zimbabwe last year were hit by the El Nino drought, receiving the least amount. I'm interested in exploring that. Can we leverage off some of the science and the data to close some of these growing disparities, because we're seeing them especially at the field level. I love the example about Red Plus, where we've seen communities be exploited in Red Plus projects because they simply don't have the same access to information packaged in ways that they understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Next.
Hi everyone, I'm Rose Ashley, the CEO of Green Apple Community, and I come from Kenya. We're talking about a decade, food security, and I see the global agricultural growth rate has declined by nearly 21% in the past 60 years. And it's stated due to climate change. But also, I was like, don't you also think that the use of GMO is also helping this to decline? Because, for example, there are communities who cannot afford to buy seeds, a packet of maize. Here we use the maize a lot. So if they cannot afford to buy this maize a packet, that means they won't have it. And being that it is GMO, they cannot do to replant. But when people were using the indigenous seeds, it was really good because they could replant, and that could also generate more food. Why did we in the first place do away with the indigenous seeds?
Thank you very much. I'll speak Dr. Adigbega, President, Society for Underutilized Legumes. So my concern is to seek ways by which our mentors could integrate legumes into these restoration efforts. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. As a way of answering the question, I will some of the question needs a bit of thinking, and we'll probably discuss them as we engage with the multifunctional landscape. I think about the GMO and indigenous species. But I'll give the floor to the panelists. It's just each of you have something like 1 minute as you make your statement in terms of our major recommendations, really, as we move forward, taking into consideration some of the questions you just heard. Thanks. Starting with you.
Thank you very much. 1 minute. Well, I have to say that what we heard links back to, I think, what we need to focus on, and that is to work with the people on the ground. So we need to work with the communities and understand what the needs are. We need to do that in partnership. And we have a very strong partnership nationally, locally, nationally, and globally that we need to activate. And I think that is very, very key. To the question, I think that is also going back. Your question is actually going back to the trade-off question in a way, because why have we been diverting from indigenous seed? Well, we've been diverting because we wanted to improve productivity, we wanted to improve harvest, but we lost other characteristics that are now becoming more important. And I think this is where we are seeing that there is a revival of the indigenous seeds, and I think that depends on the situation where you want to use them. But it's very, very clear that we need to have a wider variety of different solutions, and that relies on the knowledge that we have on the ground to understand what are the options that we have. So I think this is critical, and my meeting is probably over already.
Yes, we can move to Phil. 1 minute again.
Okay, well, I'm just going to really re-emphasize the importance of conserving agrobiodiversity, and your example really illuminates that, I think, where we are losing it and people don't have access to land braces and seeds and other materials that are really going to be needed if we're able to adapt our farming systems and our food security to warmer, wetter or drier futures, depending on where we are in the world. So I couldn't agree more with your concerns, but how we do it is the challenge. We just need to invest much more in conserving agrobiodiversity. And I'll echo, actually, I like Marcus Pereira's words at the end of the VAC session last night, which was to say that what we need to do is to rescue, conserve, and use. And he was referring really to just these kind of underutilized crops or marginal crops, whatever you like to call them. But really, it also has meaning for wider agrobiodiversity as well. We need to rescue it, we need to conserve it and recognize it's important, and we need to use it.
Ursula, please. 1 minute again.
Thank you. I think I can't agree more in terms of data and packaging of data. And as I spoke on and insisted earlier, a comprehensive and credible data, that's very, very important. So coordination needs to be there. Of course, there's good response in terms of the question, the second question around GMO. And the last one is on integration of the legumes in the context of restoration. Probably that's a good idea, but we have to really package the approaches to ensure that is on the in all the intervention. My last word would, I think, when is spoken out a lot in terms of system approach, and everybody's asking around the One Health approach. Probably that's the way to go now, to make sure that we're looking at people, environment, and and the animals and crops at the same time. So the entire aspects when we are developing or engaging in any intervention as we move on. Thank you.
Yes, Cynthia.
Just quickly on the legumes, I think there's actually already a lot of integration, especially within agroecological practices, but also other nature-based approaches as a very effective strategy. So certainly, I'm sure we'd be happy to explore further, but it is definitely a part and parcel of a lot of the work that's being done. In terms of sort of last thoughts, I mean, maybe throwing in context is important, but it's also pay attention to what's already happening on the ground. We don't have to reinvent everything. There's a lot of ground, work and movements and strategies and activities that the CGIAR and its respective programs can be catalysts for. We don't have to do everything from scratch.
Yes, Oscar.
Following the question on opportunities rather than trade-offs, I think we have really a tremendous opportunity of advances in data science, complex system modeling, which can help us connecting biophysical, socioeconomic, and behavioral sciences, and then artificial intelligence could help. It's happening in other fields. Artificial intelligence is accelerating filtering thousands of molecules, for example, for new medicines, etc., and saving years of testing. I think the same principle we could use if we manage to integrate the data that we have on agriculture, biodiversity conservation, and then we can accelerate decision-making for solutions in the future. Thank you.
Natalia, please.
Well, it was so many nice things said already, and I was just reflecting that for me, it's very important to stay positive. I would not kind of repeat again, but we know that there is no plan B, right? And we've heard here so many good examples and all these kind of new developments and the examples also in terms of projects and platforms, etc. So I think we have really to probably work even more closely and really trying to unpack all these synergies in order to stay positive and come with a positive narrative, because otherwise, if we're always being stuck on some small things and saying, oh, we don't have enough money, we don't know 100%, whatever, yeah, but we at least got something and maybe we know 70% or whatever. So I'll stay on this positive narrative. Thank you.
We want to keep the 1 minute, one round of applause up to the panelists. Yes. Talking about the disparity, I do believe the co-creation, co-development, and so on, and the agroecology principles can help us to reduce those issues related to disparity. Having said that, let me invite my colleague, Emel, probably you give the long name yourself, in terms of the concluding remarks and also somehow really a vote of thanks for everyone who has been with us. Thanks, Emel.
Thank you, Kargili. Thanks, everyone. It's very difficult to summarize such a complex discussion, a lot of aspects, and we are dealing with the complexity, but I'll try my level best. So I'll start with the nested issues of the sustainability. We all are dealing, and I think in that context, the 3 Ps comes into the picture: the planet, the people, the profit. And the profit is creating challenge for the people and for the planet. And when you talk about environmental health and biodiversity, I think it takes towards the planet. Until we match the profit part and people part, we'll not be able to deal that planet part. And in that context, as Oscar indicated, the systemic challenges can't be handled with simple solutions. So we need systemic solutions, looking at their interactions and trade-offs. And in that context, we also, when we talk about this bigger environmental health and biodiversity, I think we need to act at different levels to think from global level. So think globally, act locally. And I think global to local, that connection is something very, very important. And because the decisions are taken at different level, there are certain decisions which are taken at a farm household level, so the farm level. There are certain decisions which are taken at the community level. There are certain decisions are taken at the policy level. if everybody takes decisions in their own way, then we are not going to reach where we want to reach. That's why we need to bring all those things together. And in that context, we talk about the farmer participatory research when we talk about agriculture. But I think environmental health and biodiversity cannot be dealt only with the farmer participatory. We need people participatory, because there's a larger community beyond farmers who influence the decisions in terms of the technologies and aspects. And in that context, I think we need, we are talking about the Rio Convention, we need those frameworks. Even in our whole CGIAR research portfolio, which aligns well with those larger frameworks of the conventions, like what was mentioned about the strategic land use planning for agro-biodiversity conservation. That means whatever we do need to be aligned there. In terms of, what Oscar mentioned, the overlapping objectives and complementing opportunities, the partnership opportunities. And I think the message from Sandra was on biodiversity, biome, culture, people. I think all those need a continued dialogue. That means we need to have a mechanism in place where we have those dialogues. And in that context, the CGIAR research program or the science program on multifunctional landscape, I feel, is a docking station. It's a very, very important program which can house all those things and can steer and to bring all the actors and work together to save our future or to shape our future. Thank you. Yeah, somebody there for a group photo, please. Come. Down there. Okay. Somebody was okay.